My aunt always had a way of making me feel invisible, like I was nothing. She stole my college fund, sneering as she said I didn't deserve an education. At the time, I was furious, powerless, but beneath that fury was something she could never see, something she underestimated completely. That anger planted a seed, and it would grow into my strength. I remember sitting in my empty room, textbooks I could never afford piled around me, and promising myself that one day I'd be the one in control. Not just anyone. I wanted to be untouchable, a force she couldn't imagine. I worked odd jobs, waitressing, tutoring, freelancing, anything to keep myself afloat while sharpening my mind. Every dollar earned, every hour spent, felt like a small victory, a secret step toward a future only I could envision. Family gatherings became minefields. Her laughter, loud and sharp, cut through the room like knives. She paraded her children as trophies, all the while pretending I was a failure. Cousins whispered about my wasted potential, and even a few distant relatives sided with her, thinking they were protecting tradition. Every sneer, every dismissive glance, fueled something in me. I learned quickly who was loyal, who was blind, and who I could never trust. That lesson cost me tears, but it also built steel around my heart. She didn't just steal money, she stole opportunity, and she believed she had won. People sided with her without question. Neighbors whispered behind my back. Friends didn't dare step between us. And I smiled. I let them think their cruelty had power over me. They never realized the power I was quietly amassing, the skills, the knowledge, the vision forming silently in the background. I learned to navigate systems they assumed were impossible, quietly noting every weak link, every door that could be opened if approached the right way. I worked jobs she would never consider worthy, studied late into the nights, and learned the kind of lessons money couldn't buy. I practiced negotiation, observed human behavior, and honed my ability to anticipate outcomes. Each insult, each rejection, became a stepping stone. By the time I walked into my first real office, I wasn't just surviving, I was calculating, observing, preparing. Every detail mattered, every slight was remembered. People saw a young woman who had been beaten down, dismissed as weak. They didn't see the boardroom strategies I was mastering, the networks I was quietly building, or the financial independence I clawed for in silence. They didn't see the future president of a prestigious university taking shape under their noses. And she, of course, laughed at my failures, never once guessing how close I was to surpassing her. And then the day came when my path led me back to them. Not as the powerless girl, but as someone with authority, influence, and a plan. I walked those halls, the same ones I had dreamed of attending, and I remembered every mocking word, every insult, every moment she thought she had crushed me. Now, the thought of her arrogance made me smile. I didn't rush to confront her yet. Patience is a weapon, and I had honed it. The world believed she had won, that I was a cautionary tale of squandered potential. Little did they know, the game had only just begun. I had grown, silently, meticulously, and the power I now held would soon turn every expectation upside down. By the time anyone realized the truth, it would be too late. I was underestimated, overlooked, dismissed, but I wasn't weak. And soon, she would learn exactly how dangerous that underestimation could be. After my aunt took everything, life didn't pause, it pushed me down, harder than I could have imagined. I watched as she paraded her success like a crown. Neighbors praised her cunning, friends admired her ambition, and her children were treated like royalty. Meanwhile, I was the shadow, the girl everyone whispered about, the one who had been told she would never rise. The cruelty wasn't always loud. It came in whispers, in silent sabotage. I still remember applying for a scholarship, one I had earned on merit alone. Days later, the committee rescinded their offer. I found out later why. A phone call from her, dripping with false concern, claiming I was unfit, irresponsible. That was her power, destroying me quietly, without leaving a trace. And still, she smiled as though she was the savior of the family. Every attempt I made to push forward was met with invisible walls. Jobs slipped through my fingers. Interviews ended abruptly when they suddenly filled the role. Friends I thought would stand by me grew distant, unwilling to challenge the narrative she had crafted. To them, she was clever. To me, She was poison wrapped in pearls. But I endured it, swallowing the bitterness like medicine. Some nights I cried alone, the sting of injustice sharp in my chest. I stared at ceilings in tiny apartments, wondering how much more I could take. But even in those moments, I knew I couldn't afford to break. I turned those tears into fuel, imagining a day when her laughter would fall silent. The world believed she had crushed me, but in reality, she had forged me. I began building my hidden arsenal. Knowledge became my weapon. When I couldn't afford tuition, I audited classes, sitting in the back unnoticed, scribbling notes like my life depended on it. I borrowed books, studied in public libraries, and absorbed everything I could. I wasn't just learning subjects, I was learning systems, patterns, ways of thinking that would eventually make me untouchable. Money was scarce, but I learned to multiply what little I had. I took side jobs nobody else wanted. Cleaning, tutoring, even late-night data entry, and saved ruthlessly. A few dollars became hundreds, and hundreds grew into investments. Quietly, I was building financial independence. Skills, contacts, and influence began to follow, piece by piece, like an empire forming from rubble, and she never noticed. To her, I was still that powerless girl, the one she had mocked into silence. She assumed I would stumble, fail, and disappear. Her children, arrogant and entitled, mirrored her scorn. And the world outside? They agreed with her, too blind to notice the storm forming right under their noses. I learned to wear fragility like armor, to appear harmless while plotting my ascent. People underestimate quiet strength, and I became its master. I learned to listen more than I spoke, to anticipate moves before they happened, to strike only when it mattered. Every insult was cataloged, every slight stored for later. I knew the day would come when those records would serve me well. And then came the first crack. Her golden son, the one she paraded as her legacy, began to stumble. His grades dropped, his arrogance cost him opportunities, and his so-called brilliance dimmed under real pressure. I saw it long before she did, and a quiet smile crept across my face. Not out of cruelty, but because the universe was starting to show me that arrogance always has a price. The world still saw me as powerless. They laughed at my modest jobs, mocked the long hours I worked for little pay, dismissed my silent persistence. But they didn't understand that each rejection was part of the plan. Each sacrifice was shaping me into someone untouchable, someone who would rise higher than they ever dreamed possible. And I knew, deep down, that justice was not just coming. I was crafting it with my own hands, brick by brick, day by day. They thought I was defeated. But patience is the sharpest blade. And when it finally cuts, it cuts the deepest. Years passed. I kept my distance from my aunt and her family, and I learned quickly that silence was my greatest weapon. They thought they had written me off, that I would fade into nothing, but instead I sharpened myself in the shadows. I studied harder than anyone, took odd jobs, applied for scholarships, and clawed my way through every door that wasn't locked. Every rejection became fuel. Every insult became a reminder of what I was fighting for. My aunt's son, my cousin, lived the opposite life. He flaunted the money that had once been mine, dragging it across social media, using it to buy cars, vacations, and expensive clothes. He wasn't just living comfortably, he was wasting opportunities I would have given anything for. I watched him stumble through failed ventures and skipped classes, cushioned by the arrogance of someone who had never been told no. And behind it all, my aunt's smug smile, as if she'd ensured her son's throne and my downfall at the same time. But while they celebrated their short-lived victories, I was planting seeds. At the time, I was just a scholarship student, barely scraping by, but I paid attention. I volunteered at events most students ignored. I stayed late in libraries most professors had forgotten, and I built relationships, quietly, carefully. I wasn't just chasing a degree, I was building something bigger. The day came when my cousin applied to the same university where I was building connections. He assumed admission was his birthright. After all, his mother bragged about funding his education with money that was never hers to give. I watched from the sidelines, not revealing how deeply invested I was in the university's future. He paraded in front of me, mocking the fact that I worked odd jobs while he studied abroad with ease. But I also knew something he didn't. The university wasn't looking for spoiled legacies. They wanted driven students, visionaries, people who would bring them prestige and future success. My cousin had none of that. His arrogance was a liability, and his transcripts revealed it in black and white. Still, I stayed silent. I let him believe he was destined to walk the same halls as me, that he was untouchable. All the while, I was gaining mentors, impressing faculty, and slowly climbing a ladder they couldn't even see. The turning point came one evening at a university gala. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was just volunteering, serving water and stacking chairs. But one of the deans recognized me from a research paper I had published. Instead of ignoring me, he pulled me into a circle of scholars and trustees. That moment changed everything. I wasn't just a struggling student anymore. I was someone with a voice that people listened to. Meanwhile, my cousin's application was under review. My aunt was certain his acceptance letter was a formality. She even called to taunt me, saying, "You'll never be more than the help in that place. My son will be the one sitting in the halls, not you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because I knew what was coming. When the rejection letter finally landed in his mailbox, I wasn't there to see his face, but I didn't have to be. I heard about it from whispers across campus, from professors chuckling about the boy who thought his last name was enough. My aunt was furious, demanding meetings, trying to pull strings that didn't exist, but no amount of shouting could rewrite the truth. Her son didn't belong there. And me? I was already moving up. By the time he was licking his wounds, I had graduated with honors, secured fellowships, and was already being considered for positions that placed me inside the very decision-making circles he once thought he'd own. But I didn't stop there. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building a legacy, one that would stretch far beyond what my aunt ever imagined. And while she was scrambling to patch her son's failures, I was preparing something much larger, something permanent. Because soon, it wouldn't just be about a rejection letter. No. My aunt and her son were about to walk straight into the kind of reckoning you can't talk your way out of. And the stage was already set. The day my aunt finally came to see me is one I'll never forget. She walked into my office dressed in desperation, her eyes darting around as if the walls themselves were mocking her. Time had not been kind. Her arrogance had melted into wrinkles of regret. She begged me to reconsider her son's admission, claiming that my position gave me the power to fix what she called a mistake. I listened quietly, not interrupting once. My silence made her squirm more than any words could. When she finished, I leaned back in my chair, looked her dead in the eye, and said, 15 years ago, you told me I didn't deserve an education. Now, your son sits outside my admissions board's rejection list. And unlike you, I don't steal futures, I build them. But I don't build them for those who trample on others to climb." Her face went pale, her lips trembling. She muttered excuses, about tough times, about not knowing any better. But I could see it. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was only sorry the world had turned. And now she was the one begging for a seat at the table she once denied me. I stood, walked to the window, and gestured toward the campus below. Students buzzing, laughing, carrying books, chasing dreams. "That," I told her, "is what you tried to take from me. That is why I'll never give it to your son. This institution is for those who value it. He'll have to find another path, just as I did." Her voice cracked when she asked if this was revenge. I turned back, my expression steady. "No, this is justice. The difference is that justice doesn't need me to humiliate you. Life already did that." She left my office with her pride shattered, the same way she once left me with nothing. But as the door closed behind her, I didn't feel hate anymore. I felt peace. Because I had turned her betrayal into the foundation of my triumph. And to anyone listening to this story, remember this. Betrayal cuts deep, but sometimes it forges the sharpest weapons. Never forget who tried to bury you. Just make sure when you rise so high they have no choice but to look up. If this story hit you hard, don't scroll away. Subscribe for more true tales of betrayal, revenge, and justice. Your next favorite story is already on the way.